Today's workshop is being the anchor for your child, staying calm in the storm of big emotions. I'm excited and eager to introduce you to Greta Soderholm, who works as a clinical social worker at Vermont Center for Children, Youth, and Families at the University of Vermont Medical Center. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Hi, it's nice to see you. I'm going to do my screen share. Give me a second here. Technology is my second love. Maybe a little lower. To get this queued up. Okay. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you. You could be anywhere today. It's actually a very nice day outside. And I just really appreciate you being here. You are the most important person for your child or children. There's always hopefully a lot of figures in a child's life that have meaningful connection, but you are the most important. And I'm going to generally, when I speak, I'm going to be using the term parents. But when I'm saying that, I'm referring to all types of parents, foster parents, adoptive parents, kinship parents, really adults who are taking on the role of caring for children. But I'm just going to stick with parent for the sake of it. Anyways, a little bit just to start out about who I am. First off, my biggest job in life is being a parent to two boys. I have an 18-year-old who just graduated from high school, and then I have a 14-year-old who's going into high school. So it's like one chapter is moving in one direction, and now there's a new chapter. Like Annie said, that I work at UVM Child Psychiatry. I also teach at UVM in the social work department. And today I'm really going to be pulling from resources that relate to my background. So I'm a clinical social worker. Pretty much most of my work in the clinic is working with caregivers, parents. I love this work. I didn't realize I've been doing it for years, but I worked with foster parents and adoptive parents for 10 years, then worked at Lund Residential Program, providing support. And then when I started in this job, I really have centered my work around supporting caregivers. So I'm really going to speak to areas that I'm trained in. There's so much parenting knowledge out there. I'm certified in the Kasdan method. That's a kind of behavior modification approach. It comes from Yale. It has a lot of research around parenting kids who have, I call it spicy, but some externalized challenging behavior. There's a really beautiful model that I love. I'm trained in, I'm continuing on that path called nonviolent resistance. Really originates from Israel and Europe, and it's kind of making its way more to North America. And it's a parenting approach for parents raising kids, again, who have some challenges, some aggression. And it's really about parental self-control and resisting violence, but not causing harm. So I'll kind of talk a little bit more about those strategies. And then there's another approach also that comes from Yale that's a supportive parenting model for parents that are raising kids with diagnosed with anxiety and OCD. And then I'm just now very excited. I'm getting trained in the circles of security, which is a parent model that's very focused on the attachment model and supporting that relationship from that framework. So that's kind of my general lens that I'll be looking through. And today, really, the time together, I want to start off by talking about some of the modern challenges that parents are facing. And I really want to spend a bulk of time talking about non-escalation skills. I like the word skills because essentially I think we can all learn skills, even if there's things that we didn't get ourselves when we were children, or it feels not very intuitive. We can learn skills. Even if we practice something 5%, becomes 10% and thereon. So we'll talk a lot about the things to do that kind of really decrease the chances of escalation. I'll talk about escalation cycles, and then we'll focus on some de-escalation skills. Now, this could easily be an all-day training. So I'm definitely picking some things that I think I talk a lot about in my sessions with parents, and I'm sure I'm just skimming the surface. The first thing I want to say, so modern challenges, there's so many modern challenges. We know the cell phones, technology is a huge challenge that families are facing, but there's other things too. So one, I think a significant challenge is this information overload. Parents are seeking information at a very high rate, which is wonderful, and there's so much information. You can go on Facebook, Instagram, this is just clearly from Google, Christmas season. And it just shows you like an example of like how many times certain terms were searched. It's just a tremendous amount of times that people are searching different words. So it just suggests that there's a lot of information. Some of it I like to go with information that has a little bit, more evidence behind it. But there's a lot of parenting approaches that maybe they don't have the emerging evidence, but they're still really good. So lots of information. The other big significant change is the village has really shrunk. Families are much more spread out now than they were historically in the past. And so this idea of going to grandma's house or having this family unit that was in close proximity has really shifted. So that's another significant shift we've seen over time with just movement and technology. The other thing, I love this picture because I'm not sure who can relate to this picture, but I mean, who sat in the back of this car, right? I mean, if you have your screen on, you can just raise your hand. Yes, I remember the family vehicle. We pulled up to Pizza Hut in this thing, and I just thought it was like the showcase of the town. But the reality is, like, this is not the kind of car that would, is considered very safe. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of parenting practices that were completely considered acceptable 10, 20, 30 years ago that are absolutely not considered acceptable. There's been a lot of research to suggest using hot sauce on kids' tongues and soap in the mouth actually does a lot of harm. So parents are having to adapt to potentially how they were raised and they approach and kind of what's considered acceptable and what's healthy and what's kind of considered not healthy. So I think this is an important piece because a lot of times this is the big challenge. If you think about if we were just parenting and we were blank slate, in some ways it would be easier. We could just show up, we could like really just learn different skills, but we have our own history of being parented at a very high repetition. Hours and I mean, just tremendous amount of repetition of how we were raised. And then that ends up showing up in our parenting. So we're not a blank slate. So I have a quick question. I can't actually see the chat. I must be doing something wrong, but I'd love if people have a chance just to consider this question and if you want to write something in the chat. Did you experience parenting approaches that you don't want to pass on? And then also, are there any that you do want to pass on? So I might need help reading the chat since I'm not able to see it.
I'll read it for you, Greta.
And feel free, there's no pressure, so if nobody has anything, I'll give it another moment. People are also welcome to unmute. I'm hearing a lot of my own voice, so feel free if you'd rather speak than use the chat, that's also fine.
Greta, we do have a comment that the wooden spoon was used in my family.
Yep. Yeah. Spankings, I mean, really not just a little tap like we're talking about spankings that would be kind of classified as child abuse. Some common practices.
And also the need to want to pass on a love of nature and curiosity.
I love that. Thank you. Anything else? Maybe one more. Allows me to drink my water.
A want to pass on unconditional love.
I think a strategy I used for my son because he'd get obsessed about things was distraction. So I would either go on another topic or, go do something different just to get him off it.
Thank you. Okay. So I want to spend a bit of time, like I said, talking about, I call this non-escalation, which is cultivating the positive relationship. Now, hopefully most of the time is not in escalation. Escalation is very tiring. It can be really eroding at the relationship. So we'll just kind of talk through some just general strategies, things that are really important, I think, just to kind of try to cultivate and try to be mindful of, on a daily basis. So I like this. Somewhere along the line, I've seen this kind of concept of different baskets to fill. And there was one that really stood out to me about a couple baskets that really are important. And we know one of the baskets is love and connection. Back in the day when they've looked at research on children that were in orphanages and got very little stimulation, attention, the outcomes were very poor. These are children who didn't live very long. Their life expectancy was very short. So the basket, every day in the busyness of life, like what are the things that you're doing that fill this basket? In nonviolent resistance, there's a lot of focus on relational gestures for unconditional love, regardless of the kind of behaviors the kid is displaying, that they're getting this really high quality special time with you, where maybe it's verbal or this idea and delighting in you, where you're delighting in your child. They know that they're kind of the center of the universe. So physical gestures of affection, words that convey love. It's just a really important basket to look at filling every day. Attention, it's funny when I look at all the different parenting models, there's some that I'm not trained in, but I spend most of my time reading or listening to podcasts. This idea of attention is just a really critical basket. And I always say, if we don't proactively fill it up with things, whether it's some special time, one-on-one time, undistracted time, giving nonverbal cues of attention, verbal, the basket's going to get filled. You just won't like how it gets filled. So if kids aren't going to be able to get this high quality attention, it's going to happen. And a lot of times kids get a lot of undivided attention because they're acting out. And we have to be really careful about that, because our attention is very reinforcing. So if we give something a lot of attention, it's very likely we're going to get more of that. The other thing I think is really important is special time, one-on-one, doesn't have to be a concentrated hour. It can be 5 minutes here, 2 minutes here, 10 minutes there. But where people really deliberately are putting their cell phones down, their full focus is on their child in little doses, and big doses too. The other need is this autonomy and free will. We all have a need for autonomy and free will. If any of us as adults our autonomy and free will was completely blocked, we'd probably start rebelling. People said, nope, you can't do this, all these different ways. And so in what ways do we make sure that we're helping fill this basket each day, giving options and choices, child-led activities, allowing children to do this thing that babies do it, but teenagers do it. They kind of go their own way, they come back, they're kind of back and forth, where they're able to have some autonomy from us. And also just really trying to honor a child's voice. Anytime when there's decisions to be made, if not all the time, but when kids' voices can be included, they're much more likely to engage or follow through when their voice has been honored. So there's so many baskets, but these are 3 in particular that I'm just trying to attend to. Another just general theme, it's really hard when there's this ingredient of laughter and humor. It's hard to be angry when you're laughing. Some of probably our best moments when we think about parenting is because there's been laughter, there's been humor, and we can remember those moments. It also just the opportunity to for parents to be seen as not sort of, I use this term, commander-in-chief, that Charlie Appelstein uses, but where you're just kind of side by side and you're laughing. It fosters identity. And the only thing I always kind of try to remind is just trying to really stay clear of sarcasm. Sarcasm sometimes feels like humor, but it can be pretty confusing for people to understand, or the nuance of sarcasm. The other thing, oh, look at that. My slide is fancier. It like dribbles across the page. So the other thing that's really critical, and this is just coming right from the Kasdan method, there's a term, it's probably the first term I talk to parents about when I meet with them. It's called positive opposite. And I think we all have a very strong negativity bias. In some ways, that's probably has some benefits because we're always looking out for risks and what could go wrong or might happen. But the negativity bias can be problematic because a lot of kids, our attention goes to what's not going well. So a lot of kids, especially kids who have some more challenging behaviors, are getting a lot of attention for negative behavior. Stop doing that, knock it off, leave your brother alone, and it becomes very easy to get in this mode. So the positive opposite skill is kind of what it sounds like, is everything has kind of a positive opposite. So for the kid who's swearing, well, the opposite of that is being respectful. A lot of times people don't really take the time to say, hey, I like how you're talking to me, you're being respectful, I appreciate that, because it's expected behavior. But if you want more of something, it's really important to give it attention. So it's kids who get really dysregulated, high energy, they're oftentimes kind of ignored when they're sitting quietly and they're regulating their emotions. So anything, social reward is free. It's us showing up as parents, giving some attention, can be nonverbal, a tap on the shoulder, a smile, a gaze, or it can be verbal, and it is free. And the more we train our brain to practice the skill, yeah, you can get really good at it. I don't nail this one all the time, but I have a pretty high percentage because I can have a dialogue in my head about, oh my goodness, like the dishes, you left them in the sink again, or the bed's not made. But I'm pretty good at being able to then just try to really get good at watering the flowers, not the weeds, is my non-technical term for the skill. And then the other big thing in terms of just like really looking at setting the environment to sort of prepare that things are going to be maybe a little bit better for kids. Things that really stand out, and you see this again, kind of universal in parenting approaches, is, you know, consistent, clear boundaries, expectations. These are all things that kind of reduce the possibility that kids are getting stressed out and having more challenges. Low stress environments. So some kids are just very sensitive to sensory overload, so they don't handle it well. And if that's your kid, then it's kind of trying to really create an environment that reduces that overload. Predictable routines. There's a lot of kids who struggle, you know, during the summer because they've had this really highly structured, predictable routine during the school day. It's kind of the same. They know what to expect, and then summer comes around, and it's hard often for parents to mimic that same predictable schedule. And also awareness of transitions. There's a lot of families I work with, the kids just don't do well with transitions. And we've had like a lot of activity over the last few weeks because people are preparing to go back to school, which is a major transition. So just trying to be aware of the comings and goings of the house. We'll talk a few of these we're going to talk about more when we talk about de-escalation. But skills to really practice is delaying a response. You know, a lot of kids too who might be pretty impulsive, like they're quick to fire off, is in response they have parents who are also really quick to fire off and respond impulsively back. And most of us as parents, I used to like to think I wasn't very impulsive, but then I was like, wow, it's interesting how quick I can be to dish out, you know, that's it, you lost your phone for the week. But there's many parenting things that are just not an urgent matter, and we could actually delay a response. And so, you know what, I need to think about that. And that's also really great modeling, because when you're, you know, practicing this delaying response, you're also like modeling something for kids, especially kids who are impulsive. They need a lot of modeling, and if we do that, you know, with high repetition, they learn from that too. Moving away from power struggles, it seems so obvious, but it is amazing how easy it is to get in a power struggle. But nobody wins. Nobody wins in power struggles. And this is, again, going back to delaying response. It's sometimes just noticing the energy that goes in that power struggle and just saying, we can come back to this. This is not an urgent matter, and just not doing this kind of back and forth. I think, you know, a lot of things that I think most of us as parents do is we talk a lot. We use a lot of words, and we can fall into that chatter trap. And I think the big risk of the chatter trap is you basically become white noise to your child, is that their brain, there is actually like evidence about this, the brain sort of habituates to your tone, your volume, and you can become background noise. And you don't want to be background noise, because you want to be relevant and you want your, you know, strong parental presence. So just trying to look at those opportunities where you find yourself talking too much. Talking on itself isn't, you know, and more going back into the Kasdan method, is not researched to change behavior so well. You know, if you talk and then you kind of add some other ingredients, then it's a little more effective. But talking doesn't in itself change behavior so well on its own. I think the other huge one that I think is really significant is understanding what's behind the behaviors. What's the core issue? Is there a need? I think it's so easy to pay attention to behavior, especially if it's aggression or it's a really significant behavior. It can get this sort of undivided attention, and we can start to develop this narrative of, but this kid's just being a pain. They're just doing this on purpose. Behavior is purely a smoke signal. It's a signal, it's communicating, but what it's communicating to me is literally the most essential ingredient. If that's like the one thing you take away, is don't get too trapped in just focusing on the behavior. You're missing probably the most significant piece, is that this child might actually really have a need, and they're not so good at, you know, being able to communicate it through appropriate behavior. But there's something to dig in there. Validation and connection first. Validation is really easy to skip. A lot of times as adults, we might actually know what's best. We might say, oh, well, you just do this, or if you just did that, you'd be fine. But if we just started by taking a moment to use more of a validation, like, I hear you, that sounds really hard. Just simple pause and validate and connect first. It's easy to go into giving advice and guidance or telling kids what to do. That's another theme I feel like that comes up sometimes is a lot of parents will describe it, being raised in not a very validating environment. In again, just an environment where it was sort of, you're going to do so because I'm your parent, because I told you to, sort of more of that obedience model. And again, our culture is not the same culture. So that culture doesn't really exist anymore. We have given kids a lot of choices, a lot of voice, which there's been some great benefits. But, with that, just something to consider. And then also just this simple frame of like, consider the halt. I mean, a lot of challenging behavior is because the kid is, that's why they came up with the term hangry. They're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Being hungry and tired are two of the highest, highly relate to behavioral problems. I have some families where like they greet their kid with a muffin when they get off the school bus, because it just is going to set the tone better if they attend to the hunger before they, get in the house. Any questions? Anything as I'm kind of moving quickly to make sure we cover all this content? Nothing I'm missing in the chat? Okay.
Nope, you're good to go. Thank you.
There's another term. Sometimes I'll just throw in, these are kind of like technical terms, but I'll explain them. Positive and negative setting events. This is also just more of a behavior modification piece, but I think it's important to understand is, they're antecedents. They're the things we do, and depending on how we do them, we're more likely to kind of have the behaviors we're hoping for. So an example of a positive setting event, and when they researched this at Yale, there's a few things that stand out. One is saying please. It's easy to skip. I in my household realized that I would be like, go empty the dishwasher, do this, and just simply saying please, being calm, not repeating myself 5 times. Usually they research this by 3 times. It's called nagging. But most of the time, if parents are asking something more than 3 times, we're now raising the volume and we're not calm anymore because we're frustrated. So I'm trying to stay calm, using please. An example would be giving choices and options. My classic example of a difference between a positive setting event and a negative setting event is if I yell up the stairs to my son, get up, it's time to get going, like you're going to be late for the bus. It pretty much has a bunch of negative setting events. It's very unlikely that he's going to rise and say, good morning, Mom, how are you? Because I'm yelling up the stairs, I'm not calm, I'm being kind of demanding, it's in my tone and my body language. And so a positive setting event is going upstairs, opening the door, maybe knocking, opening the door, hey, morning, making breakfast, giving maybe a choice. Do you want cereal or I'm making scrambled eggs? Something that has that kind of connection, it's more positive, I'm not yelling. So when people use these ingredients, positive setting events, you're much more likely to get the desired behavior. Negative setting events, depending too, if you're really raising a really sensitive kid, also kids who have a little bit more spiciness, a little bit of defiance, that you'll know if you're using negative setting events because they will serve it back very hard. So you'll get it back because they'll dish it out, and they're maybe a little more on the impulsive side in response. So just trying to consider your approach. If you want a certain thing to happen, then those ingredients can make a big difference. There's a lot of positive setting event ingredients. If you know your kid well, then you kind of try to like stack those in so they're favorable. I just want to quickly, before we go into talking more about escalation or de-escalation, is just talk about aversive environments. So aversive environments are conditions that that cause harm and stress, and likely will kind of lock in more challenging behaviors. So some of them are probably all familiar, but some of these maybe seem obvious, but I think they're important to go through. In households where kids are exposed to violence, substance use, Those conditions, oftentimes you might see more acting out behaviors, or kids who are a little bit more internalizers, you might not see the behavior, but they're kind of withering away, they're withdrawing. Because they're stressed out from some of the things happening. Over punishment, punishment doesn't, it's not that it doesn't have its place, natural consequences are better. Punishment doesn't change behavior very well. It's a little bit of a trap because sometimes punishment stops the behavior in the moment, but long term, it's sort of the equivalent. If I was told you can earn a bonus at work, okay, that's going to motivate me. Or if they say, oh, we're going to cut your paycheck 50%. Okay, that's kind of punishment. It's another type of consequence. It's definitely not going to motivate me. So just trying to look at your use of punishment. Also, when they research punishment at Yale, if parents are using like a natural consequence, like taking away a phone or something, 24 to 48 hours was the sweet spot. After 48 hours, it was aversive, which is over punishment, which meant you were getting no benefit. And oftentimes you're getting actually a negative, increased negative behavior, or a lot of parents maybe impulsively said, that's it, you lost your phone for 2 weeks. And a lot of parents don't follow through because it was over punishment. So that's another couple lines on punishment. And then harsh punishment is also researched to be very ineffective and damaging. So this is going back to some of the approaches, the Tabasco sauce in the tongue, the soap in the mouth, the spankings. They can stop behavior because kids are scared, but that's the wrong reason to be trying to address the behavior with harsh punishment. The other thing that I think is something to consider is, and this happens in households where there's a lot of relational rupture. So things are really hard a lot of the time. And so there's lots of rupture, things get really big, but there's not much repair. Rupture is not the biggest problem. It's the lack of repair. And so the ability to really try to find opportunities to have repair when it can happen in a timely manner. In nonviolent resistance, there's this term called harmonizing, which is sometimes it takes us a while to harmonize. There's been a big escalation. The kids are like, I'm good to go. The next day or 2 hours later, they're fine. And you're thinking, I'm actually not fine. I was kind of deeply impacted by that. So sometimes it takes a little bit to get back into this harmony, this little relational dance, but it's really important. Anytime parents can model this repair, even though it means sometimes we have to apologize and say, I'm so sorry, I completely overreacted to you. That's wonderful because it's also teaching kids about how to repair, and they learn it from watching their parents. Perfectionism also can cause a lot of harm. It's the good news too, I think, is sometimes people really worry of I've messed this up. It's, past a point of repair, and good enough parenting, there's a term for it. And it's you're doing good enough and you're doing a lot of things well a lot of the time. You're going to be fine. Perfectionism, where there's a lot of criticism, unrealistic expectations, can become very aversive because kids absolutely can't live up to the expectations or the perfectionism. Shame and humiliation, verbal put-downs, threats. These are all ingredients that I think anytime, it's common that parents are guilty of some of these things, and that's not to blame us. It's just the opportunity to try to do better and pick yourself up quickly and address it if these are conditions that are in your life. Okay, so when I think about de-escalation, I like the idea, again, it kind of comes from that nonviolent resistance of being a strong anchor for your child. A lot of times I do think about kids they're kind of flapping around out there. The boat is rocking, and a strong anchor can really stabilize things, and parents are the strong anchor. I sort of like to say that sometimes we just need to make sure we get enough crew on our ship, because isolation can really also cause a lot of problems when we're trying to parent, when we don't have the support system. So we'll talk a little bit about now moving into de-escalation. One of the most important pieces, this also comes from nonviolent resistance, is you cannot control your child, but only ourselves. It seems so obvious, but it's hard. It's hard to do. I think small children, it can be easy to feel like we're controlling them because you can change their diaper, you can put food in their mouth. But we're still not able to control them. Like babies cry when they cry. So I think one of them, the reason I have this picture of this child brushing his teeth is, I think at my very best, I try every day to hold up the mirror and really look at myself and examine, what am I up to? What am I doing? And I really like this idea. You can only control yourself. And so it's kind of liberating, because if I can only control myself, then there's a lot I can do. My brain is fully developed, and I have a lot of knowledge and resources that are available to me as a parent. I want to talk a little bit about 2 escalation patterns. There are probably many more, but these 2 are really key, I think, to understand. So I'll quickly go through those. The first one is symmetric escalation and an asymmetric escalation. So I'll quickly show. So symmetric escalation is one I think we're kind of all familiar with. We as parents get big, we puff up, and so does our kid. So it could be we're making a request, child refuses, we get really annoyed, we're sort of puffing up, it's visible, child gets irritated, and then you just end up in this escalation loop. And it's kind of the best picture I have of this is that. It's like it's going toe to toe. This is obviously very dramatic, but it's going toe to toe, and nothing really nothing positive comes out of this. Most of the time, I think parents, we feel sort of defeated. Our child is angry, they stomp off, and repeated patterns of this again really affects that relationship. So that's and the next escalation cycle is called asymmetric escalation. So this is actually kind of a little bit different in that the child gets really big, and the parent over time loses their parental presence. In nonviolent resistance, they call it parental erasure, which is the opposite of parental presence. I mean, we all think when people decided they wanted to parent, they wanted to because they wanted to have a presence with their child. But with this escalation cycle, we kind of become unimportant and erased. So this is a parent makes a request, the child refuses, the parent gets kind of irritated or tired, could just be kind of worn down from the day. But basically, eventually the parent sort of gives up. So a kid might have, you see this in the grocery store. It's the kid who's like, I want the candy bar. And the parent's like, no, you're not getting the candy bar. But eventually the kid gets really big and the parent gets, tired, overwhelmed, many different reasons. It's embarrassing to be out in public. And so the child basically overpowers the parent. And then that pattern gets reinforced. I always say to parents, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal if you have like a 2-year-old. But it becomes a very big deal when you have older kids, because this pattern, oftentimes, the way I think about it is a child has taken over. The kind of ship is now, the child's the captain of the ship, and children aren't able to be a captain of a ship. They can't deal with that much power. They need the boundaries. So that cycle, I think, is one, we'll get into strategies, but just to be really aware of, depending on how locked in this pattern is, I think it can be a useful consideration to really just try to get more buffers, people in your immediate circle or services involved that can help. And that cycle can also feel a lot like walking on eggshells. So it's the parent who's like, I'm kind of scared of my kid. If I don't do this, they're going to be aggressive. So that's asymmetric escalation. Another thing, we'll get a little bit more now right into the skills because time is ticking away here. I think I had this happen to me a couple of weeks ago. It was really, I'll just talk it through. It was like a situation with my son, and it was quickly moving up the ladder. Like he was getting sort of angry and upset, and so was I. And the more we went up the ladder, our brain functioning was going down the ladder. So this is like the place where it was like, all of a sudden I'm kind of and now I'm going to do that. And now I'm going to take that away. And it's just it's like my brain that was completely fully online is now diminishing to that of a 5-year-old. And so I think this is a good one to pay attention to. If you find you're going up the escalation ladder and you're you're thinking, your most logical part of the brain is just quickly diminishing, it really is an opportunity to be let's pause. Let's just to notice this trend so you can kind of make a get the heck out of here plan for yourself so you don't keep going. This is where I think of situations where a parent's that's it, you're grounded for 6 months. But it's that logical parent later is like, well, obviously I didn't mean 6 months, but these two were kind of going going hand in hand. I think another thing I think of often is that people can come up with sort of some simple ways to respond in the moment, which can be very hard because escalation is very contagious. So it can be hard to be like our best in the moment. So if kids are being like, swearing, disrespectful, a lot of parents will say things like, you can't talk to me that way. And my response is, they have a mouth. They actually can. Remember, you can't control your kid because they have a mouth. But you can work on the self-control piece, which is, I do not accept your words. I hope you can find a better way to communicate how you're feeling. I mean, that's an act of self-control. If you can, hard to do, not just, but hard to do. Stay calm, cool, and collected, and more really focus on what is your response in the moment. Or, again, this thinking about verbal situations or escalation, trying to use a little bit of validation. You have something important to communicate. When things are calm, I want to make sure we discuss your thoughts and your thoughts and words matter to me. So it's kind of validation of like, you're having a hard time. It's also sort of a delaying, like, we're going to come back to this. Next one I came up with, you have kids who get very demanding. I'll do that, but only if, you don't want demands to work. That's asymmetric escalation. Kids are making big demands, and then the parent is, deciding, okay, fine, you can have that. So demands will not work to solve this problem. I will not respond to demands. It's not good for our relationship. So you're keeping it kind of focused on the relationship, and you're also having a strong boundary and a parental stance. But you're, trying to. So these are just examples, but I think sometimes if we each kind of come up with our own little things and you practice them, because it's more likely it's going to show up in your brain if you've thought ahead of these things versus in the moment. The other big thing I think that it gets really important is to develop really good exit strategies. Neurons that fire together wire together. We all know this, but when families get in patterns where there's so much escalation and it's happening a lot of the time, it's just firing off so fast. So it's almost like, I think about it like a 6-lane highway. And it's just like this pattern of negative interactions that are fiery. And like the person who's really going to develop the exit ramp is the parent. It's not going to be the kid. That's going to be our duty to say like, okay, what's my exit ramp here to get off this 6-lane highway? The other thing is, a lot of time I was doing this, some of the nonviolent resistance training, and there was this great psychiatrist in Austria, and he was talking about when people get really escalated, they very quickly scan the environment, and they're trying to determine, is somebody a support, are they a threat, or are they irrelevant? And so you just, this is all that nonverbal stuff, is that you want to be in the camp of support. If a kid determines you're a threat because your body language, your postures, you've got your arms crossed, then you're going to have, it's an invitation for more escalation. So just trying to think about, what are those ingredients that allow me to remain as a supporter to my kid when they're having a hard time? We've talked about some of them being calm, cool, and collected. Sometimes getting down on their level, being a little bit lower in your posture, not having a head-on stance with them, where it's like that, you're going toe to toe. They've been kind of researched that those types of stances are perceived as a threat. So trying to reduce that. The reason I have this picture in particular is I think it's so important for all of us when we're getting, kids who are having a hard time. We all have our own triggers, and usually they're deep. They've got roots. They don't have to do necessarily with what's happening in the moment. They have to do with like our own childhood. And it becomes really important. Like, if we don't know what triggers us and really bothers us, then we're sort of the whim of the moment with a child. So, but if we have an idea, we each have our idea of like, well, I know this is really hard for me. It bothers me. Then we have an opportunity to sort of like look at that, come up with a plan. Otherwise, we're just getting hit repeatedly over and over by potentially a trigger from our past that's showing up. Another skill I really like is just called the quiet exit. The quiet exit, it's very hard, going back to triggers, it's very hard when parents are feeling triggered. It's very hard to be present sometimes for that. If there's a way to do the quiet exit, then that's really helpful. The quiet exit is you don't storm out of the room. You can make an excuse. I need to go upstairs. I'll be right back. If you can't leave the room because it's a safety issue, then maybe it's like you go over to the stove, or now you're working on something in the kitchen, or you're doing the dishes. But it's very different than what sometimes happens is parents do exit, but it's very loud. It's sort of like, I'm out of here, like enough already. So I love this quiet exit. I've used this one a lot. I've seen other parents too who just have a little quiet exit, and if they can get a few moments away from their child, they can calm down their nervous system long enough to sort of like collect themselves and get their frontal cortex back online and get out of like that fight, flight, or freeze. Sometimes the quiet exit, if you have a little more breathing room, is get a friend or somebody on the phone. If you can get away from your child who's maybe really like triggering you and get on the phone with a friend or something like that, then that can make a big difference. So then when you reemerge, your body language and everything looks very different than if you're, in a triggered state. I love the peace offering. I did one of these last week after I climbed up the ladder and then I went down the other side. I realized that like it was so ridiculous where it was going, and I just needed to do the peace offering. I just went over to my son and I put my hand out and I said, like, I basically said truce. I was like, and he was more than willing to offer, like he wasn't going to do it, but I had to step out and be like, this is ridiculous. What am I doing? And so I did the peace offering. And then from there on out, we were able to repair. But it was only me that was going to do that peace offering. He was not going to come back to me and say, actually, I think I kind of messed up. But I also had some ingredients in there, so I had to do a little my own amends. In nonviolent resistance, they have a term I love, which is called loving limits. And I think about this one often when it comes to cell phone technology, or it's come up, well, I have a son who drives, which is it's just boundaries and parameters, but it's done with love. So I'll have simple things. I'll say, I love you. I'll do whatever it takes. Even if it means I have to set a limit or boundary. If a kid is really struggling, but they're very upset because of the boundary you're setting, I have used this one. I'll never turn my back on you. I will fight for you. You matter to me. It sort of can soften the blow what otherwise might really feel like you're just being a pain. Like, well, I'm not being a pain because I love you. So I'll do whatever it takes. Another one, not having a stance shows you I don't care and I'm not that person. So I have a stance on this because it actually matters. So I think these are like good, they can be little techniques in the midst of stormy situations. I put this up here because I think that violence and aggression often in families becomes a private matter. And I feel strongly it shouldn't be a private matter, because we know that a lot of violence, a lot of people know the social norms. They would never ever do a particular behavior out in public. They understand they know the social norm is you don't punch and hit, but it really thrives in the privacy of a family. It's very similar to domestic violence. We think about this when people are so surprised of, oh, I can't believe that person didn't know that there was any violence, but it really thrived with privacy. So if you're parenting a child and there's a lot of aggression and violence, having a stance about that of like, we will always take violence seriously. It's a problem, and we will invite in people to support and help us. And we will not be private. I've seen this be very significant. And a lot of kids will say, oh, no, this is private. Like, why would you talk to people? And being able to say, I will always talk to people when there's violence in the family. It causes too much harm. So, couple others I just want to highlight. Self-control is as contagious as impulsivity. This is a mantra from nonviolent resistance. It's called strike while the iron's cold. There's very few situations where we have to strike while the iron's hot. If we have to, there's some ways to do that, but striking while the iron's cold is delaying your responses, circling back. If you have to address it, then address it another time. But self-control is as contagious as impulsivity. So one thing is just really delaying responses, doing things like saying, when you say things like, you will do as I say, that invites defiance. Instead, self-control statement, I will do it as I say, I'm going to follow through on this. I'll be consistent. That makes a big difference. Just trying to like reframe it so it doesn't invite more defiance. I was just blending my two slides.
Hey, Greta.
Yeah.
We had a quick insight and question show up in the chat. And the question was, do you have any tips on concise language to communicate tolerance, such as name calling, physical gestures, like boundaries for these situations when the child has minimal tolerance?
Mm. I mean, I think it's just really short and sweet. Uh, so like simple, like three words, like I'm trying to think that like that's not okay. Like we don't I'm not okay with that. I'll have to, some of the stuff too, I think will be helpful because we're with us being so short on time. I wouldn't even mind if I can get some of the questions because we probably won't get to all of them, and then I can even come up with like a little I can make like a
Yeah.
little sheet or something.
Well, I can record them and I can make sure to get them to you. So like some of these longer questions, I'd be happy to record them and then
Yeah,
get them to you, and we can connect
yeah,
them to those who
yeah,
are asking as well, because I have that information as well.
yeah. Okay.
And we still do have a little bit of question and answer time too. Just
Okay, okay. And I'm almost there. This is moving quickly. Again, I've never done this before, so my apologies. I hope I'm not talking too fast.
oh, great. Please. No, this is wonderful.
So strike while iron is cold. This I love this quote from Ross Greene: "Stay out of the heat of the moment. Nothing good happens there." I in my best, I try to live by those words because it's so rare that like a lot of or like a lot of this chatter or a lot of things just really go south when we get in the heat of the moment and we do things we regret. We can repair, that's fine, but you don't want to get in a cycle of like rupture, repair, rupture, repair. So I like try to live by these words. Stay out of the heat of the moment, nothing good happens there. There's so much work to be done outside of the heat of the moment, which is all the stuff we talked about before, which is that the relationship. This is another mantra from Nonviolent Resistance. You do not have to win every battle, but only to persist. It's very tempting to want to like be like, no, we're in it, and that becomes like a battle of the wills, and it's this kind of fiery going toe to toe. But there's sometimes things you can just know, like there's no winning this battle. I'm gonna keep plugging away at this. We're gonna continue, again, if there's kids with more violent tendencies or aggression, of being like, in this household we're not okay with violence, so we will continue to do whatever it takes. That's a persistent, that's not like, you can't solve a lot of big problems quickly, and so just trying to persist over the duration of time. The other big one, I think, is just going back to like, what can we do? Because we can only control ourselves. Is what kind of things do people do in the moment to regulate your nervous system? Once that nervous system is firing off fast, we're very quickly going to lose our capacity to come up with reasonable consequences, measured responses, because we're now in fight, flight, or freeze. And so I think this is very personal for each of us, is to figure out like, what is it we do that can get us regulated quickly? So then we can reattune back to our child, which is really what they need. We are their regulation systems a lot of the time. They do not have their brains fully developed. We do. So that's another really critical ingredient. It's a good visual. Don't become a passenger. Co-regulation is not possible with parents who are not regulated. But regulation is contagious. So if you're able to regulate, it doesn't usually take too long. I mean, some kids are kind of persistent for them to then co-regulate with you. But if you're a passenger on the roller coaster, there's just no way. There's no co-regulation that's even possible. The other one, I just feel like, again, with our village has diminished, it's so important to increase your support network. Whether it is informal, it's kind of like neighbors, friends, or formal systems. I mean, the beauty in Vermont is that I feel like in every county, we have like really, I think, very impressive supports, agencies. I mean, these are systems that are really busting at the seams. People are working very hard to meet the demands. So I think that's that blend of like, not just reliance on an agency, but then like, what are you doing to boost your community? And to get more like crew on the ship, like I said, is really important. Vermont Family Network, I mean, even before this training they have some like amazing resources that are available. So just that social networking becomes really a critical ingredient, especially because isolation just causes so many problems to the escalation cycle. Also, I think it's really important just to develop safety plans and strategies. I think about safety planning, like who's going to be involved in the safety planning, looking at your natural systems. What are your concerns? And when do you use the safety plan? I think it's really great when kids understand that it's creating a boundary of we have the safety plan. This is what we're doing. There's something comforting, even if kids don't like it in the moment, of just them understanding there will be a response and it's been thought out. Again, a couple ingredients from nonviolent resistance, loving limits are part of the safety plan. Vigilant care is another way to communicate supervision, but I like the term vigilant care better. In a safety plan, sometimes you need vigilant care. It might be that a child needs more, they might need more vigilance, people close by. Are there other family members, other people that can be involved in providing vigilant care? And then parental presence. I mean, that's us showing up, and another key ingredient. Last slides, and then I know we have like another 10 minutes here for conversation, but I think it's really important to take threats seriously. Threats of all kinds doesn't mean everything's a red alarm, but it could be like a yellow flag or not a red flag. But when kids are making threats, they're trying to communicate something, and whatever that might be, maybe it's not what they say, maybe they're saying they're going to harm themselves, or maybe they're trying to communicate that, or maybe they're trying to communicate something else. I think there's times where people say, oh, like they're just seeking attention, and maybe they are. But maybe we need to figure out what is that attention need that they are seeking, and how do we respond in the different ways to make sure that the need is being met. So I just think you'll never go wrong if you take threats seriously, and then trying to decide on what level of response. That does not mean calling the police. It does not necessarily mean calling the local mental health agency for every threat. Police, honestly, I think most of the time really just need to be a last case resort. They should be used if needed. But for kids to understand, like, I take your words seriously, I take your threat seriously, and then deciding on like the intervention point. And the last thing I just want to leave before we open up to any questions is hope and possibility. I feel like I feel very lucky to have the job I have. I have like a wonderful opportunity to work with parents, and there's never a point where it's too late. So some parents go, oh, but my child's 15 or 16 or 20. It's never too late. This is like a lifetime relationship. And I just see so much hope and possibility when all we do is we just work on ourselves, we focus on ourselves, and it does transfer to the children, the kids we're raising. And I like this quote: when we make new choices, we are changing patterns. And those patterns then change really the whole family tree, moving down to the next generations. So
yeah,
look at that. I think I covered the bases as best as I could for the amount of time we had.
You sure did, and more. Thank you so much, Greta, for sharing this wonderful information. Now, before we get to questions, and Greta, just FYI, we do have a question that I want to ask. Before we go there, we need to take a short pause and ask everybody in the room to complete an evaluation for the workshop so that we can make improvements. It's a short survey, make improvements and fulfill our grant requirements. So if you can just look at the link in the chat and take a minute now to complete that, and then we'll get into questions. Thank you all in advance.
I also plan, tonight I'm gonna make a little resource list. There's some really great books and a couple podcasts I really love. So I'll put something together, and then you'll get a copy of that. And also they'll share my email address. Happy to, people have questions. I can't really answer so much very specific details about your personal family, but I'm really great in terms of resources or referrals, trying to help people get where they feel like they need to go.
Excellent. Thanks, Greta. Okay, so I'm just going to jump into, I'm just going in the order that they were received, and I have to be respectful of Greta's time. We only have a few short minutes. So let me just get to the very first question that we had was, what are your thoughts about a partner in the household, believing that there is a time or a place to have a stern, perhaps loud voice, and be very clear on boundaries with older children?
Okay. This has a couple ingredients in there. I think having a stern, it really depends on, there's a skill, it's called reprimand. Like, reprimand has its place, raising your voice, but beyond like the normal level, to get a kid's attention, can be very useful if it's not overutilized. I'm not sure I'm like nailing the answer to that question, but the idea of a sternness or like a raised voice, it's got its place. it should have a pretty limited space, just because overuse of that, you run the risk of habituation. It's loud voices. Over time, hits the nervous system, and kids, the only thing you can do is get louder and louder at some point, because if the brain habituates to that sternness or loud voices, then the only thing you could do is get louder.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Great. Appreciate it. I have to tell you that one of the things that really stood out to me was your what you shared about behavior as a smoke signal. That was wonderful. And also the principle of connection first. That was incredible. So thank you so much again for your time and investing that with us today.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. So we have many more interesting workshops coming up, folks, and you can find more details about that on our website at vermontfamilynetwork.org, along with the links to the previously recorded ones. We do have a ton of information, as Greta noted, on our website, and getting connected with us is easy. You can follow us on Facebook or join one of our closed Facebook pages if you're a parent. We have 2 closed groups, one for parents with children with disabilities and special health needs, and then one for adult children. You can also sign up for a monthly e-news or check out our YouTube channel. We're here to help, so please contact us by phone or email. And thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Greta. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.